And before Vidania gives a Dharma talk, I've just got a couple of announcements to let you know about. So the first is that on Saturday we are welcoming back 2 new order members in Sheffield. So recently 2 men were ordained, Daya Singha and Manikaya. And we haven't seen Daya Singha at all. Manikaya has made a couple of appearances at the odd thing. But on Saturday we're going to formally welcome them back. And it's a big celebration. We'd like to basically invite all of you to come if you'd like to come. And they're really big celebrations for our Sangha when people are ordained. But very positive evenings as well. It'll involve hearing, or Vidanya, who ordained Daya Singha, will explain the meaning of Daya Singha's name. Jai Gupta will tell us about Manikaya's name. We'll hear from the 2 order members as well. My friends will rejoice in them. There'll be a ritual. So do come along to that evening. It's Saturday, 7:30 in here. And then just to let you know about something special happening this evening as well at Sangha Night. So at the end of November, the 29th of November at Sangha Night, we'll be having Mitra ceremonies. And the Mitra ceremony is when people can make a commitment to the path, the Buddhist path, and to this community. And we're going to have a special evening tonight at Sangha Night. One of the groups will be finding out what that means. It's called a Going Deeper group. It's basically if you think you might be interested in taking that step, or even if you just think, well, what does that mean? I'm curious to find out what that means or what that might involve. Come along to that group, and I'll tell you more about it afterwards, but just to let you know that's happening tonight. There'll be one of the groups taking place in the green room this evening. I'll say more about that after the talk. So I'll hand over to Daniel. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Priyanaga. Can you hear me? Yeah, great. Okay. So we're in a few weeks into a season which we've called Radical Reality. We had an alternative name for this, which was Shocking Buddhist Ideas. We decided not to do that. We've been looking at some ideas that might run a bit counter to sort of accepted ways of thinking about things at the present moment. So, could be a little bit shocking. So we've heard from Bodhinaga a talk entitled "We've Got It All Wrong," basically. And this is based on something the Buddha said, which was all worldlings, that's us, are mad, basically. Our views are upside down. It's not just that we've got things a little bit wrong, we can sort of tweak it slightly. We just haven't got a clue about the nature of what on earth this is that we're in, or what life's about. So, Bodhinaga talked about that. It was a very good introduction to a series of shocking ideas, because if we can't take our ideas that seriously, because we are deluded beings, then some ideas are going to seem a bit shocking to us. And then we heard from me, actually, about science hasn't got all the answers, and from Satyajyoti about suffering isn't such a terrible thing. Suffering's not all bad. And the title of my talk tonight is Feelings Are Everything. Feelings are everything. And I want to be clear about this. Because what I'm not saying is that all feelings are invalid, that all feelings should be ignored. Okay, I'm not saying that. We sometimes have a feeling, I think we have an innate ethical sense, most of us. And sometimes we just have a really strong feeling that that is ugly and unskillful. And that is beautiful and skillful. And we need to pay attention to that. There can be a validity in that. And we need to pay attention to it. Metta, why do we know metta is better than hatred? One's ugly, one's beautiful. We just know that. So there's a sort of heart knowledge there. So that's one thing. We don't, we want to pay attention to those feelings. And secondly, feelings are an important component of what we call Shraddha, which is sometimes translated as faith, but isn't really. It's sort of our connection to what is higher and more beautiful. It's sort of something that's pulling us towards the future that could happen. And we often feel that in the heart. There's a sort of heart knowledge. This is what I need to do. This is what I need to do. This is the way I need to face my life. Which, again, we need to pay attention to. We need to pay attention to that sense of what my life's about, what ideals are precious to me, etc. So I'm not saying that all feelings are invalid or all feelings should be ignored. What I am saying is that most feelings are pretty invalid. We would do really well to ignore most of them, okay? Yeah, so for a start, it's a very, very good idea when you're talking about something like this to ask, well, what do we mean by feelings? Okay, well, what do we mean by feelings? We can get an awful lot of conflict and confusion because people just mean very, very different things by the same word, and they take it to mean, they think their meaning is the same. So what do we mean by feelings? Well, there's a sort of Buddhist word for feelings, which is the Pali word, the original sort of word from the scriptures, which is usually translated as feeling, is Vedana. So there's that one, there's Vedana. And I'll talk a bit about that. And that's an aspect of feeling. That's what's usually translated as feeling, in fact. But then there's what we might call emotion. But specifically, the sort of felt aspect of emotion. We feel emotions in the body. There's more to emotions than that, but we feel them in the body. So that felt aspect of emotions, that's what we often mean by feelings. So I'm going to talk about both of those, Vedana and the sort of kinesthetic feeling that we get when we feel angry or afraid or resentful or affectionate or whatever. It's feeling in the body. So what about Vedana? Well, we've all heard about the wheel of life and how the bottom bit of the wheel of life goes contact, feeling, craving. And the feeling, of course, is Vedana. The world pushes one of our buttons, we think nice or not nice, and we react. Ooh, give it to me, or no, I don't want that. And because we do that, and that's what we usually do, we go round the wheel. That's what drives the wheel of life. Our Vedana, our feelings of nice, I want it, not nice, I don't want it. That drives the wheel of life. And we've all heard about the gap, where we say, okay, I'm not going to just respond, that's nice, I'll go for it, or that feels nice, I'll go for it, that feels not nice, I won't. Instead of doing that, we base our actions, thoughts, actions, words on what is skillful. What is skillful, not what feels good. What is skillful and unskillful, not what feels good. And that's easier said than done, okay? That's a lot easier said than done. Because actually that's really, really difficult. We learn about that in about the third week of our introductory class and think, yes, okay. And we can do it some of the time. But the thing is, the world is constantly pressing our buttons, and it happens really quickly. And we're so used to just responding to, maybe, I like that, I'll go for it. That it's very, very difficult to actually do in practice. It would require immense mindfulness. And so we need some help in that. Now, one of the things that I think we've really got to help us in that is the precepts, okay? So if we have to make a decision every time we get an urge, we're going to be in trouble because it's probably all going to happen too quickly. But if we've got the precepts as a sort of framework of what's skillful and what's unskillful. So just to take an example, something goes a bit wrong at work. We want to avoid the discomfort, the negative Vedana of blame. So there's an urge to make an excuse. Say, it weren't me, Gov, whatever. But we have a precept, I don't lie. So we don't lie. So the precepts have given us that framework which helps us to do the skillful thing rather than the thing that just feels good or doesn't feel bad. So that's a bit about Vedana. But going for a bit further with Vedana, there's a really interesting story which in the Pali Canon, which I think is really relevant. It's particularly relevant to our times where there's so much division of views and conflict around views, where Vedana is, if you like, the culprit for that. And that's a sutta called the Honeyball Sutta. And in the Honeyball Sutta, we're introduced to a chap called Dandapani. And whoever wrote this sutra if he lived Sutta, if he lived today, could have made a really good short story writer, okay? Because we get this amazingly clear, vivid, brief picture of Dandapani. So for a start, there's his name. Dandapani means stick in hand, okay? So immediately we get the idea, well, maybe he's getting on with it, stick in hand. Sticks are also something you strike out with. You can imagine him going around, getting a jungle out of his way, and maybe doing that to sort of unclear ideas that he is, fools around him doing. He's got a furrowed brow. We're told he has a furrowed brow. So we get the picture of a grumpy old man, disgusted of Tunbridge Wells. And that's in there in the way he approaches the Buddha as well, because he doesn't approach the Buddha with the usual respect, extreme respect that people approach the Buddha. His approach is much more like, well, what's this you teach then? And the Buddha says, my doctrine is one where one does not quarrel with anyone in the universe. So he's obviously got Dandapani's number, hasn't he? He knows about Dandapani. My teaching is one where you do not quarrel with anyone in the universe. And we're told that Dandapani didn't really like this teaching. Dandapani went off shaking his head, wagging his tongue, and with his brow furrowed into 3 furrows, basically. He really didn't want to hear this. He likes a good brow, he likes a good argument, and he thinks he's put here to put these fools right and dispute with them. So he really doesn't like the Buddha's teaching that my teaching is one where you do not dispute with any being in the universe. Anyway, so he gives a fairly brief teaching, and later that evening, the monks ask him, well, what do you mean? What did you mean by that? And to cut a very long story short, because then there's another monk who comes in and elucidates further, what the Buddha, glossing it a bit, what the Buddha says is that Vedana, our sense of nice and not nice, leads to our likes and dislikes. That our likes and dislikes lead us into mental proliferation. We mentally proliferate around our likes and dislikes, which leads to views, opinions, but views in Buddhism are definitely emotionally held, leads to views and opinions. And views and opinions lead to conflict. So his teaching is one where you do not pay attention to that Vedana in that way, leading to likes and dislikes that you firmly cling on to, leading to castles of ideas, opinions that we hang on to, and then we fall out with people who got different likes and dislikes, come to different opinions. So that's the Buddha's teaching in the Honeyball Sutta, where Vedana is what's responsible in the end for conflict. And we see this across today, don't we? People dig in behind their ideas. People dig in behind their ideas and fall out with others. And the Buddhist view is very much, or the Buddha's view is very much that our views are based on emotion. They're based on personal likes and dislikes, not on some sort of objective thought. We don't know all the facts. On any subject, there's someone who knows more than us, who's got a different idea. We should sit light to our views. That's the Buddha's take. And never, ever let them lead us into conflict with others. Now that needs a little bit of nuancing, because sometimes we need to, as it were, struggle for what's right, and that may involve conflict with others. But the sign is ill will, isn't it? So ill will, if there's ill will there, then, well, it's just based on our personal likes and dislikes, and we're coming up against someone who's got some different ones. Our likes and dislikes are pretty arbitrary, actually. They're based on our conditioning, our self-image, the subculture that we belong to in society and what the people around us like. Okay, music, I like that music, I don't like that music, whatever. Who we identify with, all sorts of things like that. Might even depend a little bit on, I don't know, just how our body works. You know, I don't particularly like chocolate. It's not that I hate it, but I taste it and I think, I don't see why everybody sees it. So, yeah. So I think we need to think that maybe our likes and dislikes, there's nothing sort of universally valid about our likes and dislikes, okay? We can really get, you know, like our likes and dislikes become sort of cast in stone. There's nothing universally valid about our likes and dislikes. There's a guy called Prabha who said about this, he had a talk where this came up, and he said, all our likes and dislikes are completely arbitrary. This is a bit of a heritage Triratna joke, actually. He said, all of our likes and dislikes are completely arbitrary, except for barley cup. Because barley cup is objectively horrible. So certainly a little bit like our likes and dislikes, which arise from Vedana. So Vedana is not something that we should be taking really that well. It's not just to be seriously, we should be rising above it. It's positive. If we base our speech, thought and action on Vedana, it's positively harmful. But what about the other? I talked about two aspects. I talked about Vedana, the Buddhist word that's used for feeling, but also emotion, and particularly, as it were, the felt aspect of emotion. So we perhaps don't always take this on board, but there are at least three aspects to emotion. There's a way of thinking, there's a feeling in the body, and there's a volition. So if you think about, say, anger, there's a way of thinking, isn't there, that it's looking for what's wrong, it's looking for how I've been done to. It's spotting that and ignoring the rest. There's a way of thinking and remembering that goes along with it. There's a feeling in the body, we all know that feeling. It's like, ooh. And there's a volition. It's a volition to harm, actually. That's why we call it ill will. It's a volition to get my own back. Or think about resentment. There's a way of thinking that leads to resentment. Remember all the things that didn't go the way I wanted them to go, the way I've been injured. Think about all those. Think about that feeling, not very nice feeling, and that will to get your own back, as it were. Something like that. Affection. We think about the positive things about the person. We think positively about them. We think maybe even about our common humanity with somebody. And it often comes with a nice warm feeling, and it comes with a volition to help, a volition to be generous to help. So all of our emotions have at least these three components. They've got a cognitive, a sort of felt aspect, and a volitional aspect. In fact, I think our whole being has got those three, and they're all absolutely tied up together. There's supposed to be some sort of proof in that if you do something embarrassing, you immediately blush, or we immediately blush. It's not like we think about it and then we blush. We immediately blush. It's like our whole body, our whole being is tied up in our body somehow. So there's this felt aspect of emotion, and that's what we often mean by feeling, I think. That's what we often mean by feeling, is this felt aspect of emotion. And I think there are a few problems around this. And the first one is that we think our emotions are always valid. We think they're always valid, and we think they're part of who we are. And the second aspect is that, we think they're part of who we are, and the second aspect, got lost in my... We think that the other bit is that we think that the emotion is just the felt aspect. Just the felt aspect. We forget the cognitive and the volitional side. So I'll talk about that one first, because it leads to problems in meditation. So in the metta bhavana, it's not uncommon for people to think, well, I don't feel metta. I'll pump it out. I'll sort of, someone's likened it to squeezing toothpaste out of the tube. I'm going to squeeze some metta out. Or I don't feel grateful. I don't feel grateful. So how am I going to feel grateful? But the thing is, we cannot approach those emotions. We cannot get those emotions or increase those emotions by concentrating on the felt aspect. The way into metta, the way into gratitude, any of those, is much more through thinking. So if we think about the way that person has not done what we wanted, then we won't feel metta. If we think about the ways we benefit from them, if we think about what they're like with their kids, if we think about what they're like, with their friends, if we think about our common humanity, if we think about the fact that they suffer as I suffer, then we may feel metta. That's the way in, that's a way into metta. Not, I need to sort of have this lovely warm feeling, because that may not be there. And very often we just think metta is the warm feeling. And that can lead to just a brick wall when it comes to things like metta bhavana or cultivating gratitude. Cultivate gratitude. The word, I think it's revealing that the word for gratitude in Sanskrit, I think it is katanyata, if I've got it right. Katanyata means recognition of benefits received. Recognition of benefits received is cognitive, okay? It's cognitive. When we remember the benefits we've received, we may feel gratitude. We may have the sort of kinesthetic body sense of gratitude. We will almost certainly have some sort of volitional response, of desire to be more used, desire to help others. And in a way, those two are much more important than the feeling. So we can get hung up on the feeling in metta bhavana. I want the feeling, the kinesthetic sense, because it feels lovely. But if I'm doing the metta bhavana because I want to feel lovely, I've got it all wrong. I'm supposed to be doing it for others. So we can get into the feeling through the thinking, and we can get into the feeling through the willing, I think. Now, I have to admit that my metta bhavana bears a certain resemblance to prayer. Okay, I hope I'm calling on something to help this person, right? And when I do that, I feel metta. I feel metta. The act of really wishing this person well, wishing that this person should be blessed by whatever causes there are to be blessed, makes me feel good about them. And I feel metta. I cannot feel metta by just sort of, have a lovely warm feeling. So I think the way in, there's these three aspects to emotion, and the way into the feeling, we overvalue the feeling element at the expense of the thinking element and the volitional element. And in a way, the volitional element is the most important, because a lovely warm feeling with no volition to help is just sentimentality. It's just sentimentality. It's just about me. So that's the first way, while feelings aren't everything, is that in emotion, that feelings are not everything there is about an emotion. And indeed, they're perhaps not the most important thing about an emotion. The most important thing about an emotion may be the way we think and the way we will, what we will. And a second problem with taking the felt aspect of emotion too seriously is that, we think our emotions are always valid, and we think they are part of who we are. So on several different occasions, someone has said to me, well, it would be inauthentic of me to feel metta towards this person, because I really feel bad about them. It would be inauthentic. Or it would be inauthentic of me to feel gratitude to my mum or my dad, because actually I really resent them. And there's a fundamental problem with this. Firstly, it assumes that emotions are absolutely built into who we are, so that to feel a different emotion and be inauthentic, which is a sort of the essentialist. It's an essentialist view of us, that we are a particular way. We're conditioned people, and our emotions are conditioned phenomena. We can change them. We can change them. And if we think that I can't feel anything other than that because that's my authentic feeling, we're stuck in some very dark places. We may be stuck in resentment, when what we need to do for our own sake is to move on from that. We may be stuck in all sorts of dark places. If we think this is part of me and I can't change it, and it would be inauthentic. But actually, our emotions are conditioned. They're conditioned phenomena. And they arise largely because of the way we think, what we choose to focus on, what we choose to remember. If we choose to remember and focus on, with our cognitive sense, the ways people haven't done what we wanted, the injuries we've received, the way we've been let down, then we will feel certain emotions. We will feel ill will, we will feel resentment, we will feel blaming. If we choose to focus on something different, on the ways we've benefited, on perhaps even the reasons that person behaved the way they did, on perhaps our own unskillfulness, our own part of this, and the fact that we can't blame others because we are sometimes unskillful. If we choose to think differently, we will feel differently. There's a choice involved. There's a choice involved. We're exercising that choice when we do the metta bhavana. We come to the fourth stage of the metta bhavana. Here's a difficult person. We make a choice to think differently about them and to will differently about them, and that can lead us to feel differently about them. So yeah, it's a real dead end. It's a real trap to think that somehow this is what I feel and that's authentic and anything else is inauthentic. And that's a really common sort of wrong view, I think, around at the moment. And it's really also a trap to think that we can't change our emotions. We have a choice about our emotions. If we're committed to developing positive emotions, we learn to focus on different things, to think differently, to will differently. Very often, a lot of our emotions have zero validity. They're just conditioned phenomena. And they're often not helpful. They're something we should certainly treat lightly and learn to work with. A lot of our emotions are not valid and indeed harmful. But, as I said at the very beginning, some of our feelings are really valuable. If we try and be just completely rational, well, I mean, there's nothing more irrational than a person who thinks they're completely rational. I mean, if you've ever been around a university, you might know that. A sort of scholar who's really argumentative, etc. There's a lot of emotion there. There's a lot of emotion there. And completely depending on reason. Well, it doesn't pick up values. You know, we can't reason why metta is better than a desire for power, for example. You know, I mean, maybe if we had the ideology of Darwinism, we'd think, well, it's survival of the fittest. I want to be the fittest. Get down. If we've got a Marxist philosophy, we might think, well, violence is fine in pursuit of class war. All very, very rationally argue that. So, you know, just rationality can lead us anywhere. We need that sense, that innate ethical sense that we have, and we need that sense of connection to something higher and more beautiful that pulls us towards it. They're both feelings, the invalid and the ones that we need to take seriously, the ones that we need to largely just not take too seriously at all, and the ones we need to take very, very seriously. How do we know the difference? How do we know the difference? Well, yeah, I don't have any complete answers on that one, but one of the things I would say is, are we in a good space when we feel it or not? So when we're meditating, when we're in a good space, we're much more, somehow our ethical sense and our Shraddha speaks much more loudly to us. We're much more likely to be feeling that. If we're not in a good space, then it's much more likely that the emotional tone of our feelings will be tinged with ill will or craving or something like that. I suppose I take ill will as a real benchmark, actually. So if there's ill will involved, then it's almost certainly not coming from that sort of the best in us. Even if it seems to be ethical, even if it seems to be about ethics, like, well, I want to do that, and therefore they should, and I'm really cheesed off that they don't. If that's part of it, then it's not, it's coming from, it's like Dandapani. It's like Dandapani. A lot of Dandapani's views are based on ill will, actually. So yeah, are we in a good space when we feel it, or are we not? Would be one benchmark. What is it? This seems like a really odd thing to say when I'm saying that we shouldn't take feelings that seriously. How does it feel? There's a sort of expansive feeling about those emotions that really link us to something, to what's skillful and what's higher. There's a sort of constricting type feeling about the emotions that are actually based on likes and dislikes, what I want, what I don't want, etc., etc. So that's not a complete, it's not a complete recipe. And I think one of the things I think about spiritual life is we get a bit better at noticing the difference. I think that Sangha actually calls what I've been calling that sort of connection to the ethical sense and Shraddha, he calls it the spiritual faculty. And he says it arises from almost a union of the thinking, the feeling, and the willing. And the three sort of come together and become one faculty. But I think generally we get more in touch with the sort of ethical sense and the sort of sense of what's higher, the desire for what's higher, the more we practice, basically. I think that's all I can say, really. I mean, it's always an issue. If you don't go on feelings, you're going to ignore some really good feelings, some really useful feelings. But if we do go on feelings, we're going to respond in some ways that are really not very helpful. So we've got to learn to distinguish. And I haven't got a complete answer to that. But I do think, are we in a good state or not? And is there a will involved or not? So yeah, but I'll come back to my point that for most of our emotions are pretty arbitrary and they're just mental weather. They're mental weather, they're brought on by conditions in our past and they come and they go, and 1 minute we're happy and the next minute we're not, 1 minute we're angry and then we're not. And it just comes and goes, it's mental weather. And to a large extent, the Dharma is about learning to say, well, it'll be different tomorrow. Not taking it that seriously. And that reminds me of a little, it's a joke really, made by somebody called Alaka, who Alaka lives in Norfolk. He's a great chap, Alaka, an artist, you've probably seen some of his stuff. Anyway, apparently in Norfolk country fairs, they have a betting game, where they put a ferret in some sort of underground thing, and it's got several different openings with numbers on. And you bet on which opening the ferret is going to come out of. And so Alaka said, feelings are like ferrets. It's interesting guessing which hole they're going to come out of, but you wouldn't want to base your life on it.
Thank you so much, Vidania, for very